8:06. That's the time in the studios of Q95 FM radio. Good evening, one and all. What's your location this evening? Wherever you are, it is our pleasure to have you join us for your favorite Monday night pastime. This is the In the Spotlight radio show. We try to be here every Monday night for this program. It is Monday, the 11th day of November in the year 2019, which turns out to be my birthday. So today's my birthday, and it's on still. So let me say in a huge way, the love, the kind words, the greetings that I received in such abundance on social media, those who called, those who sent WhatsApp messages. I really just want to say thank you to you so much for sharing those greetings with me today. It's been a wonderful day so far. And Kadisha actually called me today and she said, "You realize you're having a program on your birthday?" And I told her, yes, I'm very much aware. This was planned a couple of weeks ago, so we're good to go for the program. I do not mind being here, especially for this program tonight on my birthday. So thanks again for all the lovely greetings. It is, in fact, deeply, deeply appreciated. Before we start off as well this evening, there's something I need to speak to you about as it pertains to a GoFundMe that we're doing for the program. It's not for me, it's for the program. There's some things that I would like to do. And, you know, most of the things that I do for the program, that is not related to airtime, because Mr. G, thank you, provides me with the airtime for the program. But there are things that sometimes, you know, I want to do or I need to do. And it requires, you know, some funding. I've been out of pocket for a lot of things along the way, but you know, I enjoy being here. I enjoy coming here to do this program, and I know how important it is for you as well. So I'm going to post the link in the chat tonight on social media. So those of you who would like to make a contribution to the program, please go there and click on the link and make your contribution. I would really greatly appreciate that. The link is also on my Facebook page, so if you scroll down on the page, it was posted today. There's a lot of birthday stuff going on there, but you'll also find it if you go looking for it. I want to thank Sabina for assisting me in setting up the GoFundMe, because I do not think I could set it up here in Dominica. So she assisted me with that. She's one of the biggest fans of the program, and I really want to thank her and folks like Omar Mornell, my sister Gail, and all the good folks who support me and support the program. And thank you to those of you who've in fact already made a contribution to the GoFundMe. So I am looking forward. Well, there you go. Sabina just posted the link. Thank you, Sabina, my darling. So click on it, and I expect when I'm done here that there will be some contributions made to the GoFundMe. Thank you so much. 8:10 is the time. We're getting ready to start the program. FM radio every Monday night from 8 p.m. in the Spotlight, featuring people from all walks of Dominican life, spotlighting their triumphs and tragedies, dreams, hopes, and aspirations, untold stories, touching the human and personal side of our people in politics, religion, sports, business, music, culture, the media, and more. Getting to know our farmers, public servants, youth, the ordinary Dominican. Listen to their stories. No limitations, no restrictions, no holds barred. In the Spotlight, we'll also spotlight interesting topics, issues, and relevant situations. Don't miss In the Spotlight on Q95 FM radio every Monday night from 8 p.m.
In the Spotlight on Q95 FM radio every Monday night from 8 p.m. In the Spotlight, featuring people from all walks of Dominican life, spotlighting their triumphs and tragedies, dreams, hopes, aspirations, untold stories, touching the human and personal side of our people in politics, religion, sports, business, music, culture, the media, and more. Getting to know our farmers, our public servants, youth, and the ordinary Dominican. Listen to their stories. No limitations, no restrictions, no holds barred. In the Spotlight will also spotlight interesting topics, issues, and relevant situations. Don't miss In the Spotlight on Q95 FM radio every Monday night from 8 p.m. In the Spotlight.
Welcome again to the In the Spotlight radio show on Q95 FM radio. Saying good evening again to you wherever you are, in whatever part of the world. I know it should be about 1 a.m. in England at the moment, and there is someone who said I'm going to stay up tonight to listen. Carla, good evening. Persons are quite excited about my guest. I am quite excited as well because, as I mentioned on social media, for me, this is going to be a history lesson, an opportunity to learn about my country's history. And just so you know, this guest, this has been in the working for a little while. This has nothing to do with election being called or anything of this sort. We've been working on this interview for a while, and Mr. Seraphine was supposed to be coming one time. I suspect he didn't come again. And then finally, he indicated to me, I said, just let me know when you're going to be in Dominica so we can make this happen. And he finally let me know a few weeks ago that he was going to be in Dominica. And here we are this evening. Before let's just say good evening to Mr. Seraphine.
Good evening to you.
All right, so we have the right mic open. And Mr. Seraphine, you indicated to me that before we started the program, you wanted to start with a prayer. So let's do that.
Thank you very much. I believe at this time, particularly with the environment of the politics of Dominica, hovering around us, the campaign is on and the election has been called. This country requires more than anything else a prayer time. And so I would say simply this, that we need to remove the root of bitterness, the root of anger, and allow ourselves to acknowledge Him, because in all our ways we should acknowledge Him, our God, and He will direct our path. He will direct our path. And that's critical, especially now. And so we should look particularly at the Holy Father, our God, and through Jesus Christ, of course, that we shall remain very stable in our thought process, and that we should continue to recognize that the only person who could make things happen for us the way we want it is Him. And so I take this opportunity to be in this program at this particular time. As you've said, it was not because of the political climate. It had nothing to do with the elections. It was something that we had spoken about for many, many, many months ago.
Yes.
And so here we are. So I'm very happy and very pleased to be with you, Fadina. I knew your father very well. and he was in the very same political party that I was involved with, and we had quite a good connection. I mean, in fact, he was even a tenant at my mother's house at one time in Fonkole. And so I knew your family. Your mother worked with me at Floral Gardens, our hotel, for many years. And I dare say she, not because you're the daughter, but I'll say that she was our most professional waitress in Floral Gardens, because she had got a training from the Castaways Hotel before she came to us. And her passing recently was, of course, for my family, an unhappy moment, but it's what it is.
It is. All right. I'm sorry, because you know, today she would have been the first to call me on my birthday, and she would have been the first to call the radio to extend birthday greetings to me, and of course she was not there that day, you know.
And she was a lady for Diana, and I know she loved her children immensely.
She was so proud of me. I know
and she was
that
very proud of you.
Yes.
She always talked about you.
She did.
And as you know, she always talked about me too.
She did. She always spoke about Floral Garden. She always spoke about you and your family.
Right.
I met
My
your
wife.
lovely wife yesterday as well. I have
Right.
not met her before, I don't think. So it was a pleasure to meet your wife as well. Yes, definitely. Let me allow you an opportunity to say good evening to everyone. We've not done that. If from your point of view, in terms of everyone who is listening and viewing the program.
Well, I'd like to say how pleased I am to be in Dominica. Each and every time I come to Dominica, which I had to leave about 10, 12 years ago for other reasons, because my business was affected by certain situations which might come out in this program tonight. But I must say how pleased I am. I keep, my wife in fact, keeps being astonished at the number of persons who recognize me, even if I have a hat and shades underneath the hat. People still see me for vehicle glass that's halfway up. And so we recognize that I have a special relationship with the Dominican people, particularly those who are a bit more mature. And the younger ones, though, for the most part, don't know of me directly. And I blame historians, really, you know. I think that history has done a disservice to some of our leaders. And the school system as well is lacking, definitely, absolutely, in not directing the young people as to the people who, you know, contributed to this country. And it's not just about me, it has to do with other persons. The justice of the peace in the various villages is unknown. Those who receive all these awards at the National Day celebrations, as soon as the celebrations are over, as the end of them. And, you know, past presidents have been ignored, past prime ministers have been ignored. And so there's a lack of historical information among Dominicans. In fact, it goes beyond that, even within the area of music. I mean, some of the persons, you hear their music, and you don't hear the names of those persons who produce the music being brought up, you know. People like Nazio Fontaine is one of them, of the persons, and I thought, hey, this is my favorite performer, and I hardly hear about Nazio Fontaine in Dominica, and his name hardly ever comes up. And so it is a matter of us as a country to recognize that we must give due credence to those who served us and those who have contributed in one way or the other. I don't know if Dominicans know about President de Gazon, for example, Sir Louis Latigue, Aurelius Marie, you know, Jenna Amor. People knew me as a politician, they may not recognize that he was indeed a president. Sorrento, Shaw, etc. So when I travel, I go to places like, for example, in Trinidad. I see former leaders. Their names are emblazoned in the airport itself. You go to St. Vincent.
I just came from Jamaica. It's right there.
Right.
In the airport.
Exactly. You go to St. Vincent, and you see the same thing happening in the government ministry there. All the former prime ministers, the past prime ministers are there, you know, for the eye to see. And, you know, we somehow find there's a disservice in this regard. I'll start off quickly by saying that we were at the National Day celebrations. You know, for whatever reason, I believe it kind of slipped the Prime Minister to recognize my presence there. And he did refer to everybody else except me. And my wife really didn't feel too comfortable. And she did walk out, and I had to follow at the time. So it has to do with the fact that we have to give respect where respect is due. And we cannot, as a nation, 41 years of independence, after independence, just treat all our leaders of all descriptions, you know. I'm a justice of the peace, for example. I hardly hear about the justice of the peace anymore. I mean, and those who are justice of the peace in the various communities are not being given the respect. I remember in the old days, every issue that takes place, a land issue, a problem of some kind, you go to the justice of the peace. Where are they today? And what role do they play, you know? So it's against this backdrop that I'm happy to be here and having a conversation with you. I'm not here to prove or disprove any political party.
Right.
I believe I'd like to be the adult in the room. I believe as a former Prime Minister and as a senior citizen, I would like not to get involved with the débat and the confusion and the malparler and all that. That's not what I'm here for. I'm not here to bring down or bring up. I'm simply wanting to talk the truth. Because Nkrumah once said, you know, that the day you stop talking about the things that concern you, that's Nkrumah, who is a former president in Africa. He said the day that you stop talking about the things that you cannot talk about the things that concern you is the day you begin to die. You know, and you have just complimented me on how healthy I look and how young I look. I don't plan to just die right now. I need to talk. You understand? Okay.
But yes, absolutely. You know, and we're going to get to know. We are going to get to know a bit more about you. And I must respectfully say so as well, that you do look good, sir.
Yeah, okay,
you look very, very good. And, you know, out there, I asked you what was your age, and you told me your age, and I was like, no, this man looked like he's just 150. You know, thereabout. So you've certainly taken care of yourself. Or your wife has taken very good care
God
of you.
is good. God is good. And, you know, I have a very good wife, you know, so
Okay.
I really do not have anything to complain about. You know, and my son, actually, I spoke to my son in St. Thomas earlier today. And he actually came with a quote. He says that, remember, every leader has his history.
That's correct.
You know, and so we have to recognize the E.O. Leblancs, the PJs, if Eugenia Charles, who I was not on a very similar political, you know, orientation with. But we have to recognize people like Edison James and so on. These are people who have served, and each and every one of them have some history. And we all contributed, and every leader who comes after the leader that have gone. So one day, the Prime Minister of today will be of the past, you know, and so he will need to have persons to recognize him for what he is. And there really is no competition really among leaders, because we all come to do our part. We have come here at a given time by God himself. I mean, I've heard the Prime Minister of today refer to that. I mean, if you come here based upon the fact that you were given a privilege and the honor and the dignity to serve at a particular juncture of a history of a country, it is an imperative that that be respected. And any leader who comes forward must not respect the one that came before and give due cognizance of that effort and the energies that it takes to lead a country.
All right, so former Prime Minister Oliver J. Seraphine. First of all, what does the J stand for?
It's James, actually.
As simple as that.
Yeah, very simple. OJ came about from a song, which is President Lilly, Lead the Way, Brother OJ. And I think anybody in my generation remember that song. It was a very popular song. And guess what? I've been trying to get a copy of that song.
I tried as well.
And it doesn't seem to exist. You know?
I tried
It's
as
like
well.
part of our history.
Yes.
We keep doing the thing that we need to hide, you know, accomplishments. We need to bring down accomplishments. We need to disregard personalities and things of that sort. And so there is the song though, which is the song that is very interesting, which is the one from Spider, which we all know, which is very popular, and people remember it. I sing in Sankey. You know? And let me try my voice. I'm singing Sankey song. I'm singing Sankey for OJ and John. I'm singing Sankey until freedom come. Now you get that.
Singing Sankey all over town, Labour Party days.
Exactly. That song, you know it. But the OJ song, I dare say, was equal or even better by some people's recognition of that song. It was a song that actually got a 45 done in Trinidad. I think Gordon Henderson was involved with Lily, what's his name, President Lily, to produce the song. It's one of the few songs in those early days that came on a disc. And he had on the other side was the Bishop Revolution. But if you look for those songs, you wouldn't see it. And so it goes. There's several aspects of our leadership, be it PJ, OJ, LeBlanc, whatever the case may be. When you go looking for it, the information
it's not there.
It's not there. It's part of the whole neo-colonialist aspect that you kind of disprove the existence of someone. And I'll go into that a little bit deeper with you later in the evening. But the idea that OJ even became a prime minister has been in some kind of dispute in the eyes and in the minds of those who would wish to think that it was not an important part of the history of our country.
Interesting conversation that we're going to get into a bit later. But Mr. Seraphine, where do you come from? What part of Dominica are you from? Tell me a bit about your family history.
Well, I'm the son of a gentleman called Perry Seraphine, and my mother was Theophile Seraphine. And my sister, by the way, is Josette Seraphine, and she is on DBS Radio now, Hedrington, she's married. And we grew up in a political home. My father actually was very involved with the political process, the early beginnings of the Labour Party. And he is indeed a political activist. He was so much in the forefront that he became the godfather of Mr. LeBlanc, E.C. LeBlanc.
Okay.
He became a godfather of one of his children, if not two. He was also the godfather, which I actually stood in for him for a son of N.A.L. Dugree. And he was also godfather of a gentleman, F.O.C. Harris, who was a judge and a politician of the highest level in Dominica. And he was also very closely associated with people like E.O. LeBlanc and Ronald Amo and Patrick John and all that. So I grew up in that home, in a circle where the information about politics was being discussed openly in my presence. And I remember as a little boy going to political meetings here, just out here by the Rosa Market. In those days you had the famous orators of the day, you know, people like Franklin Barron, you know, you had Mr. LeBlanc, of course, you had
Douglas?
Douglas and so on came after.
Okay.
But I'll say, let me just give you something about, you know, like Tabani, E.C. LeBlanc. I mean, E.C. LeBlanc was such a personality, and in fact you have bridged him after all. And I remember one time he was making his point very strongly because he was socialist inclined. He was believing in the power of the masses and the little man and all of that stuff. And he once said, the day that capitalists take power in Dominica, angels shall weep. No, he wasn't good in English, but he said they could make his point.
He meant to say angel shall weep.
Well, he said angel shall weep, but he made the point. It was more dramatic that way, you know?
Yes.
And you had Elkin Henry, fantastic.
I've heard about Elkin Henry
huge public speaker. I mean, he was an erudite person with a huge personality, very calm, cool, and composed. And there was his brother-in-law giving him trouble one time in Maho, and you know, he decided to bring him down. You know, Aspinall was his name. And a fellow called Aspinall in Maho, and Aspinall's walking up and down whilst Elkin is trying to speak. And he took a pause and he said, as for Aspinall, he's the biggest ass of them all. Well, the crowd fell apart.
Of course.
Everybody fall laughing and so on. But to be honest, when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, I went to the public meetings to listen to the greats of the time. You know,
so your father brought you along?
Yeah, he brought me along, and I got excited. And whilst everybody used to sing in their bathroom, I speak. I saw the crowd in front of me. So by the time I was just 20,
you were practicing.
I was practicing
in the bathroom.
In the bathroom, and so by the time I was around 24, 25, I began speaking in public meetings. So, you know, based upon that experience.
For the Labour Party.
For the Labour Party, I was very excited about the idea of making the little man walk tall and so forth. And all shall eat and all that kind of thing. I got very excited about it. I wanted to see a transformation in the so I was very inspired by the early beginnings of listening to those people in those public meetings.
Interesting. And so you came from what part of Dominica, your family?
My family came from Coolibistry, and my father did, and Sophia, which is the Seraphines. My mother came from the Grand Fort and the Delis area. Her mother came from there, but and River Syria. But I grew up in Roseau. In fact, I'm one of those that suffered the early indignity of not having a home in the early years. And I recall as a little boy being in Virgin Lane, in Fort Lane, in River Street, in Old Street, in Newtown, in New Street, and so forth. So I'm a Roseau based, you know. I grew up in Roseau. I never had the country experience except when it was necessary to go for, let's say, a holiday on Easter time or during the summer. So I grew out of that experience of that. But then quickly after, my parents moved on to evolving. My mother, who was a person in the market, and my father, who, you know, had a shop at Francolay, and then we had a home in Schlickford Crescent by the Public Works, and then we had a home in Greens Lane, so we ended up with 3 homes and so on. So most of my life, from maybe around 10 years going upwards, I was very privileged. I think I got.
What did your family do? What did your
my father and my mother had a shop in Francolay, the only big shop in Francolay.
I see.
And in those days, that was when the banana industry was
thriving.
It was the age, the golden age of the farmers. And there were trucks that would start off all the way from Canefield by Paris Williams, all the way to the Deepwater Harbour area, where the CDC has their place right now. And those trucks would be there all from early morning, late evening to early morning. And they'd come to my mother's shop to buy whatever they need, the little nani, the bread and corned beef and the different things that she'd produce. And she'd be working until 4 or 5 in the morning and open the shop again at 7. How she did that, I don't know. But then that made her capable to meet the requirements and demands for her 2 children.
In terms of your schooling,
I went to the grammar school, and I went to the grammar school, and again, I enjoyed grammar school at the time. We had, you know, in fact, the grammar school had some very serious persons who managed the school, people like Mr. Archer and so on, a gentleman called Lee Austin, who became famous later on for another reason. And there were other good, you know, teachers from Barbados and so on. But then after that, you know, we did get together. We formed the Empire Club, and many people who you know is very popular today, like Edison James and Dennis Joseph or Seam Aziz or Wilson from the Wilson guy at Pottersville, the supermarket there, and several other persons the Irving Shillingfords and different other people like that. We were in the Empire Club, and we were the young people who just came out of grammar school and the academy.
So what was the Empire Club?
Well, the Empire Club was really a club that had a number of issues, and positive issues that we tried to take care of, was to get educated along the lines of the literary debating, and we had personalities from the lawyers and other such persons, bankers, would come and inform us as to the way in which we should conduct our affairs. The Empire Club was a club where athletics, you know, thrived. I was an athlete also, a national athlete. I did the sprints and the long jump and high jump and what have you. And then we had cricket and football. It's a very popular club, and all the young men who left grammar school and academy around that period in the 60s were in that club, you know, and it was considered to be a privilege to be a member of the Empire Club. And so that was part of the whole upbringing, you know. And then shortly after, I traveled and went overseas and did insurance. Curtis Tong is the only person I know I can recall who was with the group called the Combined Insurance Company. And we were privileged in the sense that the company, which is owned by the gentleman called W. Clement Stone, he brought us into certain areas of education. Like, for example, I went to the Dale Carnegie Institute to study, and then I was also informed by the way in which we were taught the insurance business through the Insurance Institute. I was in Puerto Rico and other such places. So I traveled the Caribbean at a very early age, you know, 20, 21. And so, you know, I enjoyed that. And the youth moments that we had in Dominica following the education at DGS and other places, where we have in fact went to the inter-school tournaments where we participated. I was then an athlete, as I said. And so I did enjoy my youth in Dominica tremendously.
Wonderful. So you left Dominica, went overseas to do insurance.
Okay.
And what would lead you back into Dominica?
Because I was offered a position with British American Insurance.
Okay.
And as we call it, a debit manager's position. So I came back home, and quickly after that, I went into business with one of my associates in the insurance business, a guy called C.K. Schillingford. And we had the Green Lantern Club. It was a huge club. The Ready Deepwater Harbor is. And that's where most of the bands of the day, like the Swinging Stars, the Bells Combo, and quite a number of the other bands that were prevalent at the time, they were at that club. In fact, Swinging Stars used it as a place to practice because they were having some issues with the bishop because they were making noise by Norman Layton's place, which affected the Vespers or what it was called. And so they practiced at the Green Lantern Club, and that they performed there. People like Sparrow and other people from the Troubadours came down, and also bands from Antigua, St. Lucia. So it was a club. There was a club of the day. We probably had about 1,000 people and so on. I remember, it was a huge club. It was very good and very, very impressive in the sense that we made a lot of money at that time, and I was also an insurance agent. So I had a good life, I remember I had a new car, bought a second one because I liked it and so forth and so on. So it was a good life. I enjoyed it. That was the zenith of my life, when I enjoyed Dominica the most. It was around that particular time.
All right.
Yeah.
So you did that for a while, and then?
Well, then after that, I went into the aviation business. One of my associates, C.K. Schillingford, decided that he was going to do a pilot's course. So when he came back, we decided to go into business, and I became the managing director of a company called Dominica Airways. And we brought in an aircraft into Dominica. In that aircraft, we had 28 seats, really, and we were carrying persons throughout the Caribbean. Swinging Stars was one of them. So, in fact, Gramax, on their first trip to Guadeloupe, I gave them a special rate, which they didn't have to pay the return fare. I gave them tickets so they could meet the conditions of the immigration department of Guadeloupe. And they went in there, and they were with Armidettes there, and that's where they became famous. They stayed in Guadeloupe, and they moved on from there. So Jeff Gramax and myself built up that kind of relationship. In fact, not so long after when I became Prime Minister, I jumped over that quickly. I brought Gramax to the Super Bowl in Miami, and that was the biggest audience. I think that ever the Super Bowl, yes.
How did you make that happen?
Because I was Prime Minister at the time. I met the governor and other people who were important in Florida, and they agreed to allow one of the bands from Dominica to play the halftime. And so Gramax ended up playing there. So that kind of relationship.
What year was that? Do you remember?
That's about 1980, 1980.
Okay.
In fact, when Mr. Jeff's father died recently, his brother was here just before the independence, and he reminded me how it was for him a huge experience.
That must have been, the Super Bowl.
It was huge. Yeah, it was a huge experience. So, with Dominica Airways, we had an office in King George V Street. We also had an office at the airport. And we were doing very well. Actually, we were the primary mover of agricultural produce to the market in Born, from Dominica to the Virgin Islands and to the DVI and to other places in Antigua, etc. We were also the airline that supported the private sector. And people like George Karam, they carried tires from Puerto Rico. There was an instance when we came in, and because we were young, we were just in the mid-20s when we had this airline. And there was, Dominica and our little peculiarity as to how these fellas end up with a plane and all that stuff. And so the customs and the immigration persons, that long before drugs became popular, and they just thought something is not quite right. I mean, why this guy's, this plane? I mean, they couldn't fathom it. And so our pilot, our chief pilot at the time was François Laville, who was one from the Laville family, and CK was a co-pilot. So they came in from a trip from Puerto Rico, and then the customs and the person from the I think from the customs people came in, and they went to go and look around, and they touched the cockpit, and they were playing with the thing. And so Judge Karam got so upset, Judge Karam, that he cussed them off and so on, and then he got arrested and was brought to the barricade.
Oh my goodness.
Eventually, they really started. I mean, these are some of the moments that we have, and then you start understanding that, life can be challenging when people don't understand the need to allow each other to grow.
Was it that they were thinking that you were involved in something illicit?
Well, that's the point. As I said, illicit drug movements came a generation almost after.
Okay.
But somehow that's the suspicion that seemed to have carried, And so that was an experience. And I joined forces with Air Martinique shortly after, and we brought in a second aircraft.
Okay.
And we were doing very well until I went into politics in 75. And I became Minister of Communications and Works, and then I had to give up the airline as a condition that I would not have a conflict of interest.
Right.
And so that's where how my aviation days, came to a halt. As to whether it was a good decision, I play back a tape and say, wait, I would have been far more wealthy today if I stayed in the airline business.
You think?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
But anyway, that was part of my growing up phase in Dominica.
Okay, quite an interesting period as well for you in your life. So we started speaking a bit earlier on about your involvement, your indoctrination, if you want to say it that way, into politics, and it started from a very young age. And so we've gotten to the point where you had to give up something for another opportunity cost, maybe?
Yeah, that's right, you're right.
Yes.
But, before, actually, by the time I was 25, really, I became the treasurer of the Labour Party.
Oh.
And shortly thereafter, in 71, I became involved with the election process, because at that time, the Freedom Party had grown out of the formation in 68. So 3 years later, they saw the need to dominate the Roseau area, the Roseau constituency. And only the reason being that Leblanc at that time wanted to break down and rebuild the Roseau market. And the Freedom Party at the time felt that Roseau is the area of their strength, and they wanted full control over the Roseau market. So there was some involvement here. And so at the end of the day, we ended up having to contest that election in 71, of which I was, one of those who got involved in this. And so I remember speaking to the crowds in the roads and so on. Eventually the Freedom Party won. And then Patrick John, when Leblanc had his issues, and to be honest with you, he got a lot of pressure. Even the existing president was one of those who was involved in putting some pressure.
Who was the president?
The present president.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was involved with the attacks on the leadership of the Labour Party, particularly Leblanc. And although he had won overwhelmingly,
that's politics.
Yeah, he had won overwhelmingly in 1971. That is Leblanc did. But then, for some reason, there were structures being put in place to block and to prevent him from functioning. And it came about that there were some major issues, and strikes and so forth, and demonstrations over certain situations, or DBS radio, where the discussions took place over a gentleman called Papa D, a Kodera gentleman, who was saying things on the radio which the Premier at the time thought was against his government, and they got him transferred to the grammar school, and that caused a big uproar, etc. But even before that, I must mention something that the historians are very silent about, which is 1971. That was at the heights of the Labour Party popularity. There was a decision to, I guess, again, that has to do with that very same thing, where there was a town council having to be in control of the Roseau market. And Leblanc felt, well, his government, and he wants to break down what was there and rebuild something new.
Okay.
And he felt that he should take that decision. And what transpired really was, in 71, 16th of December of 71.
You remember the dates?
Yes, in 16th of December of 71. And I think children and young people and others may have to ignore the fact that the historians are very silent on those things. There was a demonstration. There was an effort towards the removal of Leblanc as a government.
Is it?
Yes, there was a demonstration at the House of Assembly, and the mace was taken from where it was located. There was a fight that ensued. There were struggles. There were action taken against the members of the parliament that came in. So what happened in 1979, actually, by the end of May, was just merely a repeat of what had taken place in 1771. And people don't know.
But I don't know much about I know about 1979,
yeah,
but
I'll
I
tell you
definitely
this,
don't know much
but
about
if you speak to 80% of Dominicans, I would imagine, you know, Leblanc used to say that Dominicans are people who have a memoir
pool.
Yeah, and so we have forgotten 16th of December.
1971.
And that was a moment. If you read the book from Christian, H.L. Christian, he wrote a book about, I can't remember the name of the book right now, but it'll come later. But in the book of Mr. H.L. Christian, you will see some details as to what transpired on the 16th of December 71. Apart from that, I'm not picking up that there have been much information about that.
That's the first I'm hearing about.
Well, there we go. But then there was a government that was under attack. And Leblanc had to go and hide and disappear and so forth. A gentleman called,
really?
Yes.
Under a bed?
No. He had to go back to the ministry
okay.
away from the parliament. And you had people like Eustace Francis, who was into confrontation with the crowd and so forth. And it was war, you know. And from that came to 73 when the Papadilla thing came up and people there were men arrested, you know. Maxime was arrested, he became the chief forester of Dominica, and of course Mr. Sims, or the Sims, who became the Speaker of the House on the AWP. They were arrested for causing what the government considered to have been an attack on the management of the state. And so Leblanc then left, you know. He had just won 3 years before, and then he had to leave because of the pressures that was coming against him. He was a young man still. I think Leblanc was just in his 50s at the time, a young person by the standards of politics.
So you're saying that he was forced?
He was forced out because he couldn't handle the pressure, you know, and so he left, and he decided that he would have a replacement, and the replacement was to be decided upon. And so that's where my political situation improved, because
I like the word you use, improved.
Yes, because what transpired was Patrick John was considered by some to be the alternate to some others felt it was a gentleman called R.P. Amor.
Okay.
And by then I was so incensed about the control and the domination of certain classes in Dominica that I thought that Patrick John should be given a chance, who came from less fortunate circumstance. And I remember being part of a process by which I was able to get the persons who were usually coming to conventions and so forth to get monies and to ensure that they become financially
So that happened in
possible.
a long time then, Mr. Seraphine. The same thing you just talked about.
What I just said is that to be a member, you have to pay your dues.
Oh, I see.
You understand? To be a member, you have to pay your dues. And so what I did really was, with my father and one or two other persons who had the interest of Patrick at heart, was to go to the old members, ensure that they paid their dues to become financial members. Because the organizational structure of your party was very strong.
This is interesting.
Very strong, and so we got them to pay up their dues and become registered members.
So they paid.
They paid.
They agreed.
They agreed. They paid, and they were paid to be legal in the sense of being able to vote.
All right.
Because you can't just come off the streets and just vote. You have to be a member, you have to be a registered member, and you have to be a paid-up member.
Is that so?
Yes. It was a structure, very serious structure in those days. And so those persons who became members came together, and my father and myself and others close to us were able to go and get them from their homes and bring them to the convention, and they voted Patrick because he came from them.
I see.
And that's how Patrick emerged as the premier in 73, 74.
I see.
And consequently, Patrick saw me as someone that he had an interest in, because I was very active and so on. And so in 75, I became part of his electrifying team.
I see. Of
persons who contested that election of 75. We had a good team in 75. And he had so much confidence in me that he actually had me to go to Portsmouth and to see whether Mike Douglas could qualify as the candidate for the Labour Party. And so before Douglas, there was Earl Leslie, who was there. And before Leslie, there was Eoli Blanc, who was there. And Eoli Blanc won an election against the father of Mike Douglas as RBD. Douglas, he lost to LeBlanc. And Earl Leslie also won. And the Labour Party was dominant not by Douglas's, but by the Labour Party. And so when 75 was coming around, Patrick John sent me to do a survey as to whether we should keep Earl Leslie or Douglas. And I found out that Douglas had some popularity in Glenville. He had come from England and so on, and he was a very popular person, playing dominoes and so forth and what have you. And I suggested that Douglas be the candidate.
It appears that you were quite a confidant of Premier Patrick John.
I was close to him in the sense that he had to have had he was one of the leaders of the Como Bay Sports Club, which was close to my father's shop in that area, by the Eric's Bakery, that area. And so I knew him. I had a lot of respect for him because Patrick was a very charismatic person. You know, a lot of people don't realize that, but he was a gymnast. He was a footballer, national footballer.
Gymnast?
Yes, no, was doing.
I know what you mean.
Acrobatic stuff. That was Patrick, coming out of the St. Mary's Academy. Patrick was also a footballer, as national player, and he was involved with the beginning of the trade union movement. He was also a teacher at the St. Mary's Academy and so on, and he then became involved with the business of setting up the Waterfront Allied Workers Union. So consequently, as a result of that, I was enamored by him and he to me. Okay. And so that's how I got the friendship with him.
Okay, and that friendship sort of tightened within the political realm, within the Labour Party?
Yeah. Well, it tightened up to a point until when we came to the point where close to the, after the independence. In fact, I remember one time, talk about friendship, I remember one time when, you know, Patrick, we were invited by the Queen, through the Queen, to meet with her and dine with her, with the Duke of Edinburgh in Antigua. On the Royal Britannia, and among all the people in the government, the dignity was given to me to represent Dominica and the cabinet by being the guest of the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh in Antigua, and Patrick was the one who gave me the authority so to do. And so we had that relationship, but as time went by, there were some difficulties in the parliament because I'm pretty strong-minded about my stuff, what I believe in. And so there was this situation with a certain Attorney General, Lee Austin, who had certain levels of misbehavior for which I was dissatisfied, and I kept repeating my dissatisfaction. I was president of the party and so on.
You were?
Yes, of the Labour Party at the time. And so when it came to the point of turning into me was coming about, or did come about, I decided that, you know, I had enough because Lee Austin, in my view, was creating a lot of discord within the party itself and giving us a wrong image. And I did threaten to resign, and I don't think Patrick at the time took me seriously. But that's how I am, and so I resigned. But I couldn't expect, because we had just come from independence on the 3rd of November of 1978. So when you come to turn in for me or something, I thought, well, that would just be just a blip, you know, that I left and the party just continued and I just moved on my merry way. Unfortunately, the government fell.
The government fell.
And when the government fell, that's where we ended up with another situation on our hands.
And that's where you eventually came in. We're going to get to that, but before we get to that, I want to jump back to independence for a bit. Give us a reminder of how independence came about for Dominica, and the role that you would have played in this process.
Well, in a nutshell, I don't think that the Opposition Freedom Party at the time wanted Patrick John to become the Prime Minister. I mean, that's clear.
Okay.
And they fought vigorously against it. And there was a booklet that was made popular called Think It Over. And in that booklet, a lot of information came as indicating that these are all the negative things that will be happening if we became independent, and that it was not the right time. And in fact, it should be a referendum as opposed to a decision of the government. And I was president of the party at the time. Patrick John decided that he's going to issue the Salisbury Declaration. He went in and he expressed the desire to go independent. And the four of us went to England. That is Leo Austin at the time, the Attorney General, Patrick John, Vickery and myself. And we went to England to inform the British government that we have a desire to enter into independence and to create the format by which that independence would be sought. And to give that indication and that clarity that this is where Dominica is going to go. And when we came back, I think I said that in another program, when we came back from England after this meeting, I recall we were staying at the Hotel Bristol at the time, and when we were there, we were told that there have been some public meetings being held by the opposition in Dominica, and that to expect a very uncomfortable return. And so when we got back to Dominica, Vic Revere, who was from Maho, was one of those who is very outspoken about his response to anybody who comes against us and so on. I know he has his gun and all of that stuff, and if they touch him, we'll find out. But Richmond, we dropped off. So, so we ended up, PJ and myself, and the Austin and myself, decided to come. I told Patrick that we could have passed the back road up a Goodwill and just go down the road through the Botanical Gardens and go up to Mount Bruce where we all stayed. And he says, no such thing, he's going to face them. And when we came through the East Hill Black Bridge, there was a mob, a huge mob of persons who they are very dissatisfied with the fact that we had gone to seek independence, and they were knocking and creating havoc in the place and threatening our very lives for that matter. And so that was our re-entry to Dominica as far as that was concerned. But we did continue, and there was a PIC that came in, the Popular Independence Committee was formed, which included Rosie Douglas and Pierre Charles and Bernard Wiltshire and others, who gave support on the ground to the idea of independence, and that's how it came about.
And that's how it came about.
Yeah.
In retrospect, is that, are you still satisfied that you all made the right decision?
In retrospect, it was a right decision, but we did go to a point of, how would I say, difference with other OECS countries. We came up with a Republican constitution, and there's a mixed match between that because Trinidad has one, etc. Dominica has a Republican constitution, which means that we effectively are really having the Queen as our head of the country. But I'm saying here this after 41 years of independence, there is need to revisit the constitution.
Okay.
I mean, you know, I think one leader says that we are into the stage of maturity, and consequently, I believe it would be a good thing that we should have had discourse on it. In fact and in truth, I remember the judge, Telford Judges, came up with the rudimentary white paper as to the areas that we should address in consideration of certain changes in the Constitution. The idea of why do we have a president to pay so much money on salary, and you know, what's the effect of that? What's the purpose of a president? Why couldn't we just have an elected president, something like how the Americans do it? Right. You know, and so to me, this election really needs to revisit what precisely is the direction that Dominica is taking from henceforth. Okay. I'll give an example. There is the ombudsman. An ombudsman is supposed to be an independent person, something like what the president should be. Whereby if you have any issues to do with the behavior of government and governance and so on, you go to the ombudsman. And in our constitution says there shall be, and shall means must. There shall be an ombudsman. But we don't have 40 years later, we don't have one. We've replaced it with a committee of persons that I forgot the name of the. It's so vague that I can't even remember what they call it anymore. which is to look into the behavior of the finances of persons who are permanent members of the government, either civil service or whatever, and to determine where their money is coming from and so forth, and to make sure that you work within the precincts of good behavior with finances and that type of thing. I'm not sure that I'm seeing that this committee is doing that. And so the ombudsman position, I think St. Lucia has adopted an active ombudsman, but we haven't. So the Constitution, so when you ask me whether it's a good decision to have gone independent, there is some thought that maybe if we were even French, because of, but it's a historical imbalance because we can't go back to where it was. Because as you know, Guadeloupe and Martinique, they enjoyed certain lifestyles that are superior in a sense to us in terms of the benefits of development. But I would say that we should not reflect only on the issue of the independence of 41 years ago. We should now refocus on what is necessary towards improving the existing constitution and to respond to the needs of Dominica in today's time. That's precisely how I think we should go about it.
All right. We're going to take a break. We are live with former Prime Minister of Dominica, Mr. Oliver James Seraphine. We learned tonight. All right, we're going to come back in just a while with Mr. Seraphine, and then we're going to get into that aspect of when he became and how he became Prime Minister of Dominica during that particular point in time. It is 9:02. Let me remind those of you who are just joining the program that we have a small request of you through our GoFundMe for the In the Spotlight radio show. We have set up a GoFundMe with the assistance of one of my biggest fans of the program, and the GoFundMe is just to raise some funds for the program to assist us in getting some things done that we would like to get done to improve on the program as well. So Sabina has been posting the link. If not, it's somewhere on my page. Just scroll down on my page and you will find it. So we implore you and urge you and ask of you that you go there and make a contribution via the GoFundMe. So thank you to those who have already contributed, and we look forward to seeing some more contributions from those of you who are able. And this is just about, if you are able to make a contribution, it could be $10, it could be $20, it does not matter. Every bit adds up, every bit, falls under a donation or contribution, and before you know it, we will get to the point that we need to get to in terms of the funds that we would like to raise. So we urge you, take a moment during this short break and go on the link and make your contribution, or commit to doing it once we're done with the program, or it could be when you get paid. Whatever the case is, we would definitely appreciate it. So thank you to everyone who is listening. Those of you who are on the Facebook Live, we're happy for the interaction that is happening between those of you who are actually on the live. We're coming right back. Keep it locked. So.
In the Spotlight on Q95 FM radio every Monday night from 8 p.m. In the Spotlight, featuring people from all walks of Dominican life, spotlighting their triumphs and tragedies, dreams, hopes, aspirations, untold stories, touching the human and personal side of our people in politics, religion, sports, business, music, culture, the media, and more. Getting to know our farmers, our public servants, youth, and the ordinary Dominican. Listen to their stories. No limitations, no restrictions, no holds barred. In the Spotlight will also spotlight interesting topics, issues, and relevant situations. Don't miss In the Spotlight on Q95 FM radio every Monday nights from 8 p.m. In the Spotlight.
One-on-one with interesting personalities, educational and informative topics and issues, intriguing and entertaining, a must listen to. In the Spotlight, Monday nights from 8 p.m. on Q95. Thank you.
All right, we're back. The integrity in public office is what we were trying to remember, Mr. Seraphine. Integrity in public office. That's the commission you were trying to remember the name, right? Okay, so we're back on the program with Oliver Seraphine, Oliver J. Seraphine, OJ, as we no, not the OJ from the United States, this OJ right here. And we're having quite a trip down memory lane with Mr. Seraphine, and we're going to continue our conversation with him. But this time, we're going to start talking a bit about how he became Prime Minister of Dominica at a very critical time on the islands. Mr. Seraphine.
Yes, well, actually, what transpired was the 29th of May 79 was a period in which Dominica was faced with a crisis unprecedented in the annals of our history, where there was a mob, a crowd that came in, and there was a death of someone. That resulted in who was the person who killed Philip Timothy. We don't know up to now.
Up to this day.
There have been efforts made to establish that it was done by the defense force that was there at the time. But lo and behold, the effort towards removing government began then, where each and every member, I was ill, I was unable to be at the House of Assembly that particular time.
Oh.
And there were movements between the John government, the Prime Minister and myself, to indicate my concerns about certain matters which it would take too long to go into this program.
We understand.
But suffice it to say that I had some areas of concern. And when I resigned, as I said earlier, I had not anticipated that the John government would have fallen. But what transpired was there was a surge of hostile and terrorist acts against the various members of the parliament, and they, one by one, gave up and decided to resign from the government as well. An interesting side note to all of that was, even today, there's an example of what transpired by way of a stone. And I'm saying so to say that there is folklore, true or not, that certain remnants or sections or parts of the gentleman Philip Timothy, because Dominica is a peculiar place, we have a certain level of experiences in the occult and so on. And the thinking is that part of the whole process.
Even today?
Even today. And so the process was that a certain body part of Philip Timothy is supposed to be buried in the ministry.
No?
On the grounds of the ministry. People are not even aware that there is a stone, a big stone, that's standing vertically in the ministry, on the grounds of the ministry. And I'm sure you did not recognize that yourself. Well, if you pass there next time around, when you're going around the ministry from Bath Road, you will see a stone standing right there. The question, that stone is supposed to symbolize the fact that the government of the Labour Party was thrown out of office.
Oh.
But mark you, a government of the Labour Party have been in government for 20 years. I don't even think any Prime Minister and the members of his cabinet are aware that such a stone even represents anything, because it's just hanging there. But it has a symbolism to that rock standing there. The question for me is, why is it there? I mean, because if the Labour Party was removed, there's a Labour Party in government, that should be removed.
Right.
And so I suggest that if those who have the power to remove it, I would say, please remove it. Anyway, having said that though, the result of all of that was that when everybody started resigning as per the mob rule and so on, some very serious things was taking place. There was the President, de Gazon, who was forced to run at night and take a flight out of Melville Hall, although there's a mob and a crowd out there trying to prevent him from entering Melville Hall. He escaped barely by the skin of his teeth and took off. Shortly thereafter, there was the president who was chosen by Patrick to replace de Gazon, so Louis Latte, and he too was attacked. his vehicle was turned over. There was an effort to burn down the vehicle and all of that. And there were some very serious persons who, in today's governance, who was involved in this. You know, I realize that it may be a little bit injudicious to mention who, but I think Dominicans know who I'm talking about. And so here we have a second president being under attack. So you don't have a country without president.
Right.
You don't have a country where every member of the government were forced to resign through the attacks on them at their homes, etc. And so there was a country that was in mayhem. By then I had left and gone to the countryside.
Okay, so you had left Rosa.
I left Rosa and had gone to the countryside. And then I recall having the presence of someone, I believe it was, if I recall, in fact I wouldn't name the names, but there are two people who came to see me.
Somebody, before you continue, somebody's asking an important question here. Were the protests because of independence?
No, the protest was purely because of the fact that there were two bills that were about to be passed. You know, the Essential Services Act, which would meant that persons who are like police officers or firemen or working at the airport, that they could not strike. Nurses could not strike.
Oh.
Yeah, that was the intention of the bill.
That's a huge one.
Yeah, that was big. And the other one was the fact that there was the issuance of pen names, you know, who were being used by civil servants to release information from the civil service. And so the intention was
to put a muzzle on that.
To put a muzzle on that as well.
Yeah.
And so there were two bills that were there, and so as a consequence, there was a galvanized effort, which included the persons of the hierarchy of Dominica today, who forced themselves into this situation of demanding that the government resign as a situation
this is,
response to this.
This is interesting.
Yeah.
Many of us don't know those.
Well, you see, this again, this is my point. We have a deliberate intention by the systematic removal of information from the public space. Children are not being educated about their past. Children do not know. I mean, these are basic information that I'm giving you. These are information that every child of Dominica should know. We can't be talking about all the great leaders of the United States and Africa and Europe, and especially Europe and the UK and all of that stuff, King George V and Napoleon and all this, when we have our own situations that we must put out and let people know what is happening. In fact, I have a situation where Alec Lawrence was, he wrote a book and he launched it at the Fort Young. And the reason why he launched that book, he says, was because I came to his office and nobody among his secretaries knew me except for one person who recalled that, oh yes, I think I know this man at Floral Gardens, his hotel. So she knew me as a result of my hotel, but she didn't know me as within the political context.
So otherwise you were irrelevant?
Totally, in fact, I believe that there's an effort to make me irrelevant over the past many years.
Right.
You know? And I understand.
But you're not.
I know I'm not. And I can tell you that you and I could take a walk through the streets of Rosa, or in fact, many villages of Dominica. Or let's go to St. Thomas and St. Croix and certain places, and you will see that how relevant I have been.
Yes.
And so I'm very pleased that Dominicans have recognized me out there. I'm very pleased that I am yet to meet someone who have aggressively addressed me in a negative way. Why? Because in my innocence, I was part of a culture of politics, including Patrick John and E.O. LeBlanc, who, rest his soul, had to fall back on the state being generous to assist in their livelihood. We were not of the description that we had to go out there and use the state to aggrandizement. It was not a position of empowering wealth. It was a position of service. That's what we were.
Service to people and country.
And so let me, at this juncture, you know, I think we might be deviating a little bit, but I must say
we'll come back, don't worry.
I must say so, that, you know, in spite of it all, the Prime Minister of Dominica had last independence made a statement to wit that former Prime Minister should be given a certain dignity, etc., and that they should be given a salary commensurate with a certain area of, you know, of service and so on. A vehicle and so on. And I must now announce that there have been efforts that I made, but there's been a response. Patrick John himself, being in bed, couldn't do anything about it. Edison James was not so well in Barbados for a period of time. And so I found ways and means to cooperate with them to say, let me handle it.
Okay.
And so I have been in touch with, and I did get a response, and the government of Dominica, through the Prime Minister, felt obligated to assist based upon, I would think that it had to be, I would say, something that came from a spiritual act more than anything else. I believe that when the Prime Minister announced it, he was inspired by something beyond the politics and all that, because we know that Edison James is on the other side of the political polarizing. I'm distant from the Labour Party because of where he came from and who he is. And Patrick John has been not so well respected and so on over the past many, many years. And so I'm thankful that the PM listened to the spiritual direction to assist and ensure that Patrick John, the remaining parts of his life, and so am I, as well as Edison James, would receive a benefit. And he did.
Okay, so you're saying that that has come through?
Yes, that has come through.
Money and...
I have been a beneficiary of a vehicle just as of a week ago.
Okay, a week ago.
Yeah,
good.
and so
is it a vehicle you're happy with?
It's a good vehicle.
It's a good vehicle.
Right, and I'm anticipating the same could be said for Patrick and for Edison, who will, I expect, be benefiting similar to me because I'm no superior.
Have you spoken to them at all?
I have spoken, and the expectation is that it will come through because they have chosen vehicles that were supposed to be unavailable or whatever the case may be at this point in time.
Okay, so you've gotten the monies yourself, as far as you're aware, retroactive, I presume.
For minor retroactive.
A minor retroactive aspect. Yeah. So you've gotten yours. You've confirmed that Mr. James and Mr. John have all gotten their monies.
Absolutely correct.
You've gotten your vehicle.
That's correct.
And you have not confirmed whether they've gotten their vehicles.
They have confirmed they have not got theirs.
They have not gotten theirs.
The anticipation is that should happen.
It should happen.
From other sources of information.
So the Prime Minister kept his word.
He kept his word. Some would say a little on the, many months later, but nevertheless, he did eventually do that.
Okay.
And for which we are grateful.
So this is something good.
So that's a positive, Yes. And I'm not here to bash anybody, but I must say this though, that we were talking about how I became the Prime Minister.
Yes, so we're going back.
And we're going back to that.
Yes.
And I'm saying this, I take strong offense to the fact that the historians of Dominica, I take very strong offense to that the historians of Dominica totally forget the backdrop upon which I became the Prime Minister.
So let's tell them.
Yeah, because what transpired was that there was the act of anarchy of our country, an act of a situation where we were not with a government. We had no government. The ministers resigned, the Prime Minister was forced to resign. In fact, he didn't, but he was the last man on deck.
Did that happen during the 49 days of the strike?
That was part of a strike period that brought about the fall of the Labour Party. Okay. However, we all know who was behind that strike and who was the profound personality who was strong and persuasive to cause that strike to take place. And so when John was having to lose his government, question is, there's no government in Dominica, right? You come and you get me in the countryside and you say to me, come down. And we, the Committee for National Salvation, which is the CNS, is now comprising of every leadership of the country, be it church, youth, the various trade unions and so on, the Employers Federation, the Dominica Association of Industrial and Commerce, every single authority in the land, the youth leadership, formed themselves into a committee to save the country. You come and you get me from the countryside, I come to town. You're offering me something you can't give me. You're saying you want me to become a prime minister. But how do you give me a prime ministership when there's a constitutional process by which that prime ministership should be given?
Yes.
So you've got to be an elected member, of which I was, and you've got to have more than 11 persons, 11 or more out of the 21, to give the majority of support in Parliament.
Right.
And so what did I do then?
Which is what currently still exists.
Which exists today, which
yes.
I had to do was to go and form the Democratic Labour Party. And there were members of the Patrick John government that came in and joined me, together with 1 or 2 opposition members, to give me the 11 plus majority. So I became the only prime minister I know in living memory within the Caribbean that was a joint position of appointment. 1 as the CNS and 2 as the constitutional process in the cabinet, in the parliament. So here I come from 2 angles. I come in, we form the government, we turn around and we get a president, which is General Ambo. So we're now back into business. Dominica is back into business. We are back into a constitutional situation where the country can manage itself. And what was threatened was that the mobs that could have supported PG out there, the defense force that was there with all the arms, and the police that is supporting to a large extent the Freedom Party, the hierarchy, and you have the defense force with arms ready to defend their former prime minister, and all of that is happening at the same time, and I'm coming in that melee with all that confusion.
Where was all of this taking place, by the way?
Right here in the Rosa Dominica.
All right.
And then at the same time, you had the Alliance, which was a group of very progressive, dynamic intellectuals, the Power Riviers and the Bernard Wilshires and the Pierre Charleses and them all were there, who are looking at the possibility of doing a Grenada on Dominica, because Patrick John is on his knees. They could do something like how Maurice Bishop and the individual movement took over Grenada. So I'm in a powder keg. I put my life on the line.
You did.
And so I formed what is referred to as the Civil Defense Unit.
Civil Defense Unit.
Nobody knows about that.
Before we get to the Civil Defense Unit, Mr. Seraphine, why you?
Good question. The reason it's me and not Eugenia was because I happen to be president of the Labour Party. And that I happen to have had a certain number of persons in the cabinet who knew of some of the things that I had problems with Mr. Austin and so on. And as a result of that, I had a certain amount of ground support within the Labour Party. In other words, I became an alternative to PG based upon the popularity that I had from my youth growing up in that Labour Party. They couldn't find, there wasn't anybody else per se within the Labour Party that controlled that kind of support within the party itself.
I see.
Because I was president.
I see.
And then Eugenia Charles, I dare say, she came from a minority. There were around 5 or 6 members of the parliament. That was Eugenia. How was she going to get 11? Rare on earth would you find 6 or 7 persons of the Labour Party joining forces to give Eugenia support in Parliament. That would never have happened.
Okay.
And what you would have had is discord and chaos. So I put myself... More chaos. So I put myself on the line and I accepted the responsibility.
I see.
And I was able, with certain persons who joined me at the time, like Eustace Francis and what's his name? Michael Douglas and others, they came for Parallel and others, and we came forth and we formed that party, Correct, who just departed. And so here we were able to come up with an alternative to the PG administration at the time. When that happened, we saved the country from mayhem, confusion, and chaos. You know, and so when you turn around and you say that this moment in time of a country must be disregarded, placed aside, ignored, and did as if it never happened, I take strong offense to that.
And because I can understand why.
I'm not your play toy that you just use me. PJ is gone, and I'm just there for a few minutes, and then you just bring in another government as if there was nothing there. And guess what? What transpired was, shortly after I became Prime Minister, a few months after, the hurricane came.
Yes.
When the hurricane came,
Hurricane David
came, and this CNS and Mark, the CNS, the Committee on National Salvation, were the ones that were trying to program and use the government of the day, which is, by the way, a coalition government with the Labour Party and the Freedom Party. And even in recent times, you hear historians glibly saying that, in their opinion, the first coalition government was in 2000. Totally ignoring the fact that Brian Allen, Charles Maynard, and others were all part, Afi Martin from the, Alliance Party, were part of a new government that was formed following the issues where Patrick, unfortunately, was moved from office. Right. And so we had our first coalition government then. And what transpired was, after the hurricane came, I looked for the people from the Committee for National Salvation. I was being very persuasive, all these leaders and so on. No, they disappeared. And I said that the CNS has blown away by the winds of David. They're gone. And I no longer subject myself to them and their influences.
Right.
You understand?
So that was the Committee for National Salvation.
Correct. They disappeared. I said, get down, out of it. I don't have to listen to you guys. When the hurricane is on, Afi Martin was involved with helping. Fellas like Colin Booley was involved with helping. Other persons who were right up front assisting. And consequently, the country started getting to where it's supposed to go.
You were going to tell me something about the formation of a civil...
Yeah, the Civil Defense Unit was created, and the purpose of that Civil Defense Unit was purely to give me some kind of support. It was a group of young people who we formed into a military force.
Okay.
And they comprised of some persons who were trained by someone called Ronnie Roberts, and that remained almost a silent, quiet, protective group that never surfaced in the public sphere. And it is because of the problems of that overthrow and the fact that I had some concerns about my family, that this small unit of persons that were formed were trained to do some level of protection. So in other words, I was not in this thing in a way in which it's ordinary. I remember one night we were at Springfield where I live, and the Defense Force person who was out there turned around and said, whilst I was gone in the darkness, shouted, OJ is a wanted man. My wife called Major Newton, who was the commander, and says, please come and take your men away from my property right away. I don't trust anybody.
Wow.
There were times like what happened in a recent situation locally in the local politics, where a white man came into my property and walked through my door and was in the house. And the Defense Force were out there and they saw the man and they didn't say anything about it. So there have been incursions into my property and at Monroe's. And my wife actually had to call upon the Defense Force support that was out there and say, hey, this white man is inside of my drawing room, what's that going on, and so on. And so there was risk.
Wow.
You understand? It wasn't a walk in the park. But guess what? I recognized that was happening, and therefore there was a time when the other matters came up. Like, for example, Ross University came up as a matter of interest from the president of Ross University, Dr. Ross and Butler, and they came and they made a presentation for another evaluation of, they came through for another evolution of their interest. And their interest was based upon the fact that they wanted to set up a veterinary school in Dominica. They approached my government and they wanted to know what was the process by which the vet school could be opened in Dominica. Also, in the Ross University situation, they wanted to know whether they could be given an official license to function in a more, organized and structured way. They wanted also to do something like having a place of abode for the university. And they chose Melville Hall, on the hills of Melville Hall, overlooking the bay, overlooking the airport. And the government of Dominica had a lot of land in that area. And they thought that that's the best place that they wanted to go. And consequently, as a result of that, they approached the government and they made some proposals. We then had a counter proposal. Our counter proposal was that we would prefer that they be at Portsmouth, because we had just gone through a process of land acquisition of the Picard estate.
Excuse me, can you do that? Can you?
And because we were involved, with this discussion, and because we were involved in this discussion with Ross at a level where they wanted to do two schools really, the med school and the vet school. We agreed that they will do it in Picard. Why? There was a support base for us in Picard from the Labour Party for time gone by, and we thought we should give back to Portsmouth something. And guess what? This became the new Millionaires of Dominica. The land acquisition added to the fact that Ross became established in Portsmouth as opposed to Melville House. And the reason why they wanted Melville House, the Margaret Hospital was close by, the beaches were close by, you had Margaret and Wesley villages right in the middle. And I took the decision that they should go that way. But then at the time that we were taking that decision, both the Attorney General, Brian Allen, as well as Charles Maynard, the Minister of Health, were opposed to it, to the extent that a certain, I wouldn't name his name now, but a certain doctor who was very prominent from Dominica sent a message to them saying that the acceptance of a medical school is the bastardization of the medical profession. That has remained in my mind. I never forgot that statement. Wow. And I had to inform these two gentlemen that, listen, let's get something very straight here. The students that are going to come out of Ross will not be practicing in Princess Margaret Hospital. They have to go and finish off wherever they're going and will benefit in the meantime.
Right.
So that transpired. By the time the next government came in, there was so much altercation and confusion going on with the government to come. The kind of confusion was such that Ross started having second thoughts about having to maintain the presence of the veterinary school. The veterinary school that went to St. Kitts, and people don't seem to know that. Somehow they seem to have forgotten that. Somebody called Mr. McLawrence, a boatman, was the one who carried out the animals that was there for the purpose of examination and the treatment and the education of the veterinary school. And when the Ross University left to go to Barbados, that very, very week, the vet school of St. Kitts was doubled up. There was a new department of the vet school in St. Kitts. And so we lost out on this. And then I had this thing, I think Lennox on the Church may have had that in his book, I think. The day where I dismissed both Brian Allen and Charles Maynard.
You did?
Yes, because they were affecting the process of that particular licensing of the vet and the medical school. But then that same afternoon...
Wait. When you say you dismissed them, what do you mean? You fired them?
Fired. And so that afternoon, they sent a letter of resignation. And so there is, I think Lennox have it in his book somewhere, where there seems to be a confusion.
But you fired them.
Who fired who and who didn't fire the other?
But you fired them.
They got fired. And unfortunately, my good friend Afi Martin, we had an issue and so on. He was also dismissed and so on.
So you fired Afi Martin?
Rosie Douglas also at some point he was dismissed.
You fired Rosie Douglas?
Yes. I was saying it at the time. So, but the point of the reason for all of that was to clear we were facing an election.
Yes.
And we needed the Labour Party as a party to contest the next election.
Right.
And those persons who comprised that coalition had to be removed.
Ah. So those that were removed were not Labourites?
That's correct, absolutely. And so the non-Labourites were removed and we ended up with a Labour Party. In fact, in the House of Assembly, one could look at the Hansard, and the Hansard is very clear about that. It says that, I said that the Labour Party is hydra-headed. When you cut one head, the other one grows. And so this is the kind of environment that we were operated from.
This is a lot of stuff that you're giving to us tonight, Mr. Seraphine. A lot of information, a lot of history that many of us are learning. You're imparting quite a bit of knowledge and history of our country here.
See, now you don't have so much time. Let me just fast track a piece of history that you might know.
Okay.
When Rosie Douglas became leader of the party after his brother was proven not quite capable of to bring us to a victory, because by then the UWP had come in and they started becoming very strong. What transpires is that Rosie Douglas became a very close associate of mine. We grew, friendship created. And that came about because he recognized that there was something I could bring to the table to his advantage. Because by then, I must admit this, the same way I give a compliment to the Prime Minister for giving Patrick, and the former leader of the UWP, and so on, myself, the benefits of what he promised a year ago. Let me say this, that Rosie Douglas saw in me an opportunity to assist him going forward. And I did assist. I got lots of money and so on for him in his campaign and what have you not. But guess what? It was the UWP, however, who at that point recognized the talents that I could bring on the table, that in 1995, when the UWP formed the government, guess who they called to make the chairman of the NDC, National Living Corporation? Yours truly.
Oliver Seraphine.
Correct. They also made me a director of the Aid Bank. At that point, I had had no conversations with the leader of the UWP.
And you were not linked to the UWP?
And I was not linked to them in any way. But what they were looking at is someone who could handle it for them, the NDC. But guess what? We had an unusually talented group of persons at that NDC whilst I was appointed. Sheridan Gregor was there. Our gentleman Pascal from Afwawi was there. Louis Gabriel was there. Mrs. Amor was there. A chap called Warrington was there. The person who is the president, Baptiste of the UWP, was there. You know, and so we had a group of persons of excellence. In fact, you could say we had even another cabinet in terms of quality. And I was chosen to be chairman. But I gave back. Guess what? My name is not mentioned. But it turns out that the Creole Festival came up because I was then one of the founder members of the Hotel and Tourism Association. I was a founder member of the Eco Insights and Services, which is a small hotel organization. And the intention from those groups of persons, which included people like Anne Gray and Jane Finnegan and the Harris girl from Sutton Place and Judith Perryman and the other young lady from Jennifer from Evergreen. These are the people that formed that organization, and the intention then was to form what you call a Cadas Festival. To create movement of people. That was brought to the NDC. We approved it as me as chairman. Me, Oliver Seraphine as chairman, approved it. It went to a committee which comprised of people like Stanley Georges, who was then the acting manager of the NDC. And we had other persons like Sobas Esprit, who was the secretary. And we had Freddie Nicholas, who was part of that organization. I believe, what's his name for Theophilia's husband? Mark Marie, and so on. So when they met, and also Michael Fagan, when they met, they come up with the alternative idea that they said, hey, we cannot now have Cadas Festival because it's too narrow-based. Let's have a Creole Festival. And I recall Michael Fedel being the one who said, let's call it the World Creole Festival.
Interesting.
That's how it came about. Then we proposed this, it went to the cabinet of the UWP, which included Timothy, who was the Minister of Finance, and Prevost, who was the Minister of Tourism. Approved it. But guess what? I hear about Too Long being the person who, as though somehow he brought it to me. Too Long came 1 year after under the Festival Commission as the executive director of the Festival Commission. In the year, 1 year later, the person who was the manager, who's given no credit whatsoever, is Stanley Georges, who was in fact a musician himself. And he was part of that program. And so to turn around and then Gordon Henderson, became involved because he became, let's say, the ambassador to the program.
Right.
He was one of those persons who went to promote it
He
after it
mentioned
was
that.
done.
Yes.
But wait a while, it was after it was done by the NDC
That he got involved.
that he got involved, because he was not part of the NDC. And nor was any of the other persons that they're making references to. So Toulon was not part of the NDC. The NDC came up with an idea. And mark you, financed, accepted, and promoted by the government of the day. And so, you know, we come across all of those diversions and history being reconstructed
Yes.
in the image and likeness of whoever wants to do it without doing research. I am saying that we need to research. We need more research. We need more information gathering. We cannot continue to operate in a willy-nilly fashion as we are accustomed to do. For example, the questions that we need to look at today is in the presence of, and I'm coming a little bit closer to the politics of today.
Okay, we'll come back to the politics of today in just a while. There's a few things we need to go back. We need to backtrack a bit before we get into the politics of today. And a couple of things. Hurricane David. We need to talk about Hurricane David. And we need to talk about the OJ dollar. There's a few things. Don't worry, we'll be all right. There's a few things we need to talk about. So let us talk quickly about the Hurricane David experience and what transpired in Dominica at that time, and what role you played in getting Dominica back on its feet.
Okay.
So we'll try to summarize some of the areas so we can get to the point.
I hear you. And I will say this, that Hurricane David, and you've seen some pictures I showed you earlier,
You did.
which hugely represents a situation that was dismal, very bad. And when I became PM, don't forget that it's only 3 months later that Hurricane David came.
By the way, how long were you Prime Minister for?
A year and months.
A year and a few months, okay.
And the same way, it goes to the point of how long was Rosie Douglas, you know, 6 months.
Yes.
How long was Prime Minister Patrick John as Prime Minister, 6 months. And how long was Pierre Charles in government, 2 years I was in government for the entire term.
I get you.
So in other words, you know, the issue for that we have to focus on really, as I see it, is based upon what's performance within the period of, inclusive of the time frame that we worked. And when David came, HMS Fives first came in. HMS Fives was a British frigate. And I worked with the British frigate, and we sent out the messages back and forth. The gentleman who just came in a while ago, Mr. Charles, was together with another individual on the radio, a program using the radio,
The ham radio.
ham radio, to get assistance out there and so on. But we did very well. When this transpired, shortly after the French were here, just from Guadeloupe, Martinique, and they turned up here and they were all over Pottersville, Savannah, and whatever, and in the Windsor Park, and they were starting to drop. We started getting food immediately after the hurricane was there. We had sea rations from the Americans.
Brogodo.
The Brogodo was a very interesting thing, because I think somebody made a mention of the Brogodo the other day. The Brogodo is another matter. It's basically this. There was a building, and there were wooden floors, and we got a mass amount of clothes in bags and what have you, and boxes. And so when the workers would send the box or the big bag of clothes, and they send it into the building, falls on the wooden floor, making Brogodo as a sound. That's where Brogodo comes in. That's all it came out.
I thought it had to do with clothes.
No, well, it's just clothes, you know. But then food became huge. And in fact, people remember that Christmas has been one of the best Christmases that they had had up to that point in time. Because food was immense, to the extent.
Butter, oil.
I mean, food was
Corned beef.
and corned beef and corned beef hash.
Corned beef hash.
There was a lady.
I like corned beef hash even today.
Yeah, good. There was a lady in the Caribbean territory who turned around and said, "Mon pas quand ça OJ qu'a dit tout, moi last manger corned beef hash." You know. So anyway, the reality is that there was an abundance of food, in huge supplies, and the way in which it was done, and that is the critical part. You know, there's a structure in place. In fact, Colin Woolley wanted to remind me of some of the events that came out. I thought that we should write a book. And
well,
so
a few people are saying that you should write a book.
write a book
Is
on
that
her.
something you're going to do?
I will be doing. In fact, it's called Stolen Legacy.
All right.
That's the name of it.
Good.
So
it's in process.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's close to being finished.
Okay, good.
And there are lots of stuff that I wouldn't talk about in this program that will come out in that.
And that's all right.
Okay. But hear this. During the time of the hurricane, we had a structure in place. In fact, throughout Dominica, you have what you call task forces created. It was non-political. It was a mixture of all parties in every district of Dominica. And the food that came in to Dominica at the time was distributed by these people. The amount of food that was coming was such that by the end of the year, that's why I say people had a great Christmas, because they get their salaries, they were getting free food, they were getting free clothing, and so that was a moment of euphoria, really. And the older people remember it as such. And you know, one of the things I'd like to say is we had structure, because David brought about an opportunity for rethinking, reprocessing, and reorganizing the manner in which management should take place. And one of them was this, that the local governments, that is the village councils, the various political parties formed themselves into structures of organization, and food was then distributed through them. There was no political thing about me being Labour or this one being Freedom and that one being Alliance. It was Dominicans getting together.
Right.
In fact, there was this thing of the Kudme system, where houses were reconstructed quickly in places like Fonkola and other places, merely by the fact that people were getting together and helping each other. So in one day, there will be 20 people from this to help this person, the next day 20 people to help the next person. It was a time of getting together.
Somebody said after Hurricane David, Dominica became one.
That's absolutely correct, because there was a euphoric feeling that things were moving at a dynamic pace. In fact, what we did was, we had a team of persons, and it's important to understand this. Shortly after the hurricane, we had a team of what I call I call them the first division of resource people, that include Colin Booley, Philip Nassif, Dr. Liverpool, and Judith Garraway. These are people who came with me. Where did we go? United Nations. I spoke at the UN. I spoke at the Organization of American States, to the Organization of American States. We spoke at the State Department. We spoke with Sorrel McDonald and her committee in Canada. We went to Barbados through the CDB, and we had an integrated effort where all the countries of the world and committees and so on, and people who were giving assistance, came forth at one meeting held by Sir Willie Dimas, with the assistance of Bernard Yankee and Crispin Sorrento Dominicans, who were then at the CDB. And we had a meeting of all donors, where each one agreed that they're going to take this as a responsibility, and so it was distributed. Sheridan Gradwell actually was one of the persons on my team, and Wolseley Louis, came to that meeting. And that is what empowered Dominica's mobilization and momentum. In addition to that, we had this question of, in Cuba, where we had the non-aligned movement, where I gave, what's his name, Dr., I used to call him doctor, he's not really a doctor, but Bernard Wilshire went there to represent me at this place. And guess what? We ended up with the people from the Arab countries contributing to Dominica in large amounts of money at that particular conference, where they were doing it. And that is where the whole process of our involvement in the non-aligned movement started, which created another structure of assistance for Dominica. Even today, Morocco is still in Dominica. More than that, I had a state visit to Venezuela. And here I met with President Campes. And President Campes signed a treaty of cooperation, which today continues, even today. And this present government is benefiting from that connection that I made. Guess what? Let me surprise you. We have an international airport. Yes. Approved, yes. Babs Dyer will respond to that. You call him anytime, ask him. Because he came in after me after I left government. It is approved for, guess where? Grand Savannah. And guess what? It was rejected by
Salisbury?
Yes, that was a time when there were no homes and no houses in Grand Savannah, so it was considered to be a natural gradient going on.
Where was the funding coming from?
From the Venezuelans. It was approved. The drawings were already done. Everything was in place for the international airport in Grand Savannah. Babs Dyer, then was government jet came in for him from Venezuela. He went to Caracas. He received the okay for the international airport. How it's to be funded? There's to be a PAT grant and PAT loan. And that was going to be done there. And that was destroyed. Let's talk about Canefield Airport. Let's talk about the fact that that's how it came about, how Canefield Airport came about. Because Patrick, John, Vic Rivera, and Lee Austin and myself went to meet the British government in Barbados. When we went there, Patrick John wanted the international airport. He insisted that's what he wanted. Unfortunately, he did not get what he wanted, but he was living, I think, at the Holiday Inn with, what's his name, Rivera and the other gentleman, Lee Austin. And I stayed in another hotel close to the British Embassy. When I went in there, I met the gentleman was the financial controller, and I told him that I was early, and I said that's what our main theme for our meeting when the Premier comes, is that he wants his international airport. He says, no way. We can't give that to you because within a 100-mile radius, you have 4 airports. You have an international airport in St. Lucia, you have one in Martinique, you have one in Guadeloupe, you have one in Antigua. Show me how it's going to make sense. If it's not going to make any sense at all, he says. And so...
Kaipul Quasi.
But he says, you know what? If there was a place we could have had an airport closer to the city of Roseau, we would appreciate that. And then I recall that during my aviation days, my pilot situation before that showed me a drawing of Canefield just below where the Nasi Francis car place, wherever they call it. Going across to Seymour, there was he made a drawing with watercolors, and he says, "OJ, I've been passing through." Perry used to call me. I've been passing through that area, and you know what? I think we could do an airport there. I remember that. And so at the meeting, I says, you know, the gentleman at the time was Sir Bruce Greatbatch, who was in charge of the British Embassy at the time. And the gentleman who, I sometimes wonder how much I can maintain things in my mind. David Craxton. David Craxton.
You're sharp.
David Craxton was the financial controller who I spoke to. And David Craxton said, well, Mr. Seraphine, if you can prove that this airport can actually come through, we will be the first to build it. Have no doubt about that. But the international airport, no way. When Patrick came in, later on in the meeting, I said to him, well, listen, this is what has happened, and they're not prepared to give us the international airport. They talk about these 4 countries within 100 miles and so on and so forth. He said, I don't know what they say. I want my international airport. Okay. It turns out that when he was saying that, the next thing that happens was there was a 0. So I then ventured, in spite of what he said, I took the bold-faced move to contradict what my leader was telling me. And I said, well, I just spoke to Craxton and he says that they would approve the Canefield Airport if we can prove it can work. And guess what?
We got it.
We got it. And guess who made it happen? Patrick himself was part of that process because he turned around and he actually came on a flight, on a plane, that landed on the road at Canefield by Seymour, which proved that they could be done.
Yes.
So a private plane came in and flew on that road, and Eugenia called it the Playboy Airstrip. And that's how we came. That's how we became with Canefield.
All right.
So I consider Canefield my grandchild. I consider Patrick the implementer.
Yes.
You understand?
Yes.
And then, of course, this is basically, you know, how I see that our government, any government, each and every one of them have a right to claim a destiny. That they did this because they were brought to Dominica at that particular time. Patrick came through when Libla left, but what did he leave behind? Aid Bank, National Bank, Social Security. These are critical areas of our development.
Yes,
and when you turn around and ignore this and do as if that didn't happen, don't come through with this to me. Let me look at what I did with the Cuban Scholarship Program. For a long time they tried to deny it. until I showed it to you a while ago.
You did.
Where there's a document that was prepared by the committee, the Guild of Undergraduates, where they finally recognized that I was the one who gave Dominica the Cuban Scholarship Program in 1979. And people do as if that didn't exist. The same thing happens with the St. Andrews High School. And guess what? Here's something that's very fundamental and for which I'm passionately happy about. I am passionately happy about was the fact that the Carib, I call them Caribs, Kalinago people, had very few, just one or two that would slip through. Yeah.
No, it's okay.
Just one or two that would slip through and enter the convent by somebody more likely than not bringing them to a point where, you know, the adoption and so forth. If Felician Alfred was one of those who did that, you know, to adopt a Carib it was called in those days. But few made it to the grammar school, few made it to the academy, few made it to the convent high school. But guess what happens? When the Wesley High School got that, we decided that the Londonderry grounds is an area where a school could be put.
Right.
And Reverend John Gomes was the one who came to me as Prime Minister to ask for the grounds, the equipment and the facilities of the Londonderry Youth Camp for the school. So that school came into being, St. Andrews came into being. You understand? Very important.
Very important.
So when St. Andrews came into being, John Gomes was the one who, with Early Castro and Mr. Robinson, who was also Methodist, they persuaded me to do it. And I said, okay, let's go for it. I gave a 99-year lease. I've been to the ministry looking for that 99-year lease. I haven't seen it yet. I cannot find nobody can show it to me. But that was the deal with the St. Andrews High School. And when the St. Andrews High School came about, together with Mr. Martin Roberts School in Marigot, which is another comprehensive school that's created in Marigot, that now started the process by which the people from the indigenous committee could start going to university, to high school. That's where it started. So when today I hear about a Carib person who is a doctor, 2 surgeons and all of that, they may have their problems, I don't know what for. But guess what? When you have these people becoming doctors and you have others who become accountants and become lawyers and so forth, that is the genesis. And guess what? I was the one first to have given them a vehicle, bus service from the Carib territory, as I did with Cottage, for people to go to Portsmouth High School. And I gave them the bus service that brought them the children, because if you have a school at Londonderry and the children in Carib territory at the time, how do they get there?
Yes.
So we give them a bus service now. I am happy that the government of today is doing the same.
Yes.
But what we must agree on is that each and every one of us
have
our own thing. And let's guess, and last thing on the St. Andrews High School. My daughter went to the St. Andrews High School, my second daughter. And when she was in the classroom, they tried to say to her that it was Eugenia Charles who brought that school.
Oh my God.
She objected, and the teacher at the time told her, well, I don't know about that, it's Eugenia Charles who did it, and so on. End of the day, my daughter said, you know what? When she went to meet her sister Josette, her aunt Josette Seraphine, in St. Thomas, she sent me, got me on the phone and said, Daddy, I am not coming back here to Dominica because these people are too wicked. They do not like to give people what is due to them. And she has never been back to Dominica. She has passed through. She now is very important in a position where she is, but she never chose Dominica, and she probably never come back and leave. And so that's basically an experience that I had.
We have to talk about the OJ dollar. He's laughing. I got pictures of that today. A colleague actually gave me a couple of pictures of that today.
Well, look at the OJ dollar and you'll see somewhere in the corner says not to be released except for relief goods.
Right.
Not to be used except for
how
relief
did that
goods.
how did that come about?
This is exactly the point. We thought at the time when Hurricane David came that it is an imperative to get people to work. Important that people work. And so when we reached the point where there was a gentleman, again, so high up in authority, the gentleman who is so high up in authority that people will probably understand who I was talking about, because he's high up in authority, who stopped the boats from bringing in free food because he wanted to ensure that I do not get the food that would give me the kind of leverage for the coming elections. And there are two boats were blocked. One, the Catholic Relief, and the PL 480 foods that was coming in out even dwarf what we had already got. Free food for the country of Dominica. And those boats were diverted to the Dominican Republic. I fired this guy.
Of course you did.
As the boss.
Of course you did.
As the boss of the food desk. And I replaced him with Felix Thomas from Kingsville.
Right.
That's the truth, you know.
I believe you. I believe every word you say.
And
here.
so I am saying this, that here, the OG dollar. I discussed with the Americans through Sally Shelton, and who was the ambassador to the United States. And I said, okay, let's make a deal. If you give us the food, can we use it in a voucher system? We spoke about that in various ways. They sent an officer down here as a technical person, and we discussed it. And they said, okay, they're going to give us food, and we're going to have a food for work program. So persons would work in the hospital, in the schools, in the drains, in the building of houses, they get paid for working. They don't get free money, they get paid for working with the OJ dollar. They use that OJ dollar and they go to the place where the food was stored and they get a requisite amount of value for food or building materials. That's the concept. That was the concept for the OJ dollar.
Okay.
To work for the food you're getting. Because after 6 months, we agree that it's time for the nation to go back to work.
No.
But back to work means that 6 months of free food have been given anyway.
Okay.
But we're getting a lot of food. What do we do with it? What do we do with all that food that's coming in? Do we continue giving it free? No. You work for it. And so the concept of work for food was the idea behind the OJ dollar. That was used against me though, because the government, the opposition, was very deft in their political gambit by saying OJ is becoming a rich man, he has his own dollar. And in finality, because I realized we're running out of time, let me just say that the Economic Citizenship Program began with OJ Seraphine's government. When the persons from Iran, the Shah of Iran, and his family was trying to escape from the claws of the coming Ayatollah, and they approached my government to get a process through which they'll be able to get some freedom. And I agreed that they could then become Dominicans, on the provides that each and every one of them must invest at the minimum of $1 million within 6 months.
Oh.
That was passed through the Parliament of Dominica. There's a company that was formed, and it's in Dominica's Hansard. That company was formed for the purpose of receiving and remember the Shah was one of the richest men in the world.
Yes.
And so was his family. We had 51 persons who were qualified and passports were made for them, which was not given before the elections. And we were trusting that the people of Dominica would have recognized that. And it didn't happen. So the Shah of Iran was due to have been coming with his family here in Dominica to create employment. Okay? That was on the Economic Citizenship Program, a concept of investment citizenship program. And so when I hear people say that it started off with Eugenia Charles and not true. There's proof of that in the Hansard. And I'm suggesting that those who are historians go and check their vibes, check their situations as to where their country is. And I will say finally, I know that we've been saying finally and finally. But
it's okay. I already alerted the gentleman on the outside that I need an extra 10 minutes. Okay. So we will take another 10 minutes and then wrap
so we
up.
must talk about...
Because there's another program coming up.
Yeah, I understand. But we must talk about where we're going forward. Because this is...
So this is what I was going to do with you before we wrap up. So first of all, I want your views on the current political environment and how we go forward from here.
Well, let me put it this way. What is the philosophy? What is the ideology that we have in place on either side? What is it? What direction are we taking? And this is what is critical for us to make a decision as to how to think of the process of our thoughts in order to ensure that we do the right things in terms of determining the future. We must now agree that the agricultural sector must be refined. There must be certain aspects of agriculture, especially the medical side, that requires a rebirth. You know, the way in which we plant, what do we plant and what market are we seeking? I want to say this, that how do we look at the private sector? We have hotel development, 5-star, yes, great. What has happened to the indigenous hoteliers? What has happened to the Evergreens and the Anchorage and to the Hummingbird Inn and up at Papillot and all that. Listen, we are in an area where we have 400,000 Guadeloupeans, 400,000 Martinicans, 180,000 Lucians, 120,000 Antiguans. Are they going to pay to stay in a five-star hotel? Answer is no. Then where are the accommodation that should have been put into place for the small hotel, the arrangements that put in place for the small hotels? And I will say this, in 2002, I wrote an article, a position paper to the then minister, Prime Minister, and I said that the high cost of servicing loans due to the high interest rates and so on, which are not in harmony with international tourism jurisdictions, which are our competitors. That is the high interest rate. The low hotel occupancy is affected by the fact that it cannot advertise, inadequate access to airline services and benefits. And of course, we also said that we needed to look at the position of refinancing the small hoteliers with the aid bank and other banking institutions. My question is, whoever becomes government must now look at the floral gardens, must now look at the hummingbird inns, and all the small hotels that are here. So for our neighbors next door. When they come in here, they don't want to spend 400 US and 500 US a night. The man from St. Lucia coming next door wants to spend $120. He see if he can do that. And so that's basically some of the thoughts on this particular matter. Ferry services. Are we having something? We're talking about the OACS and so on, the harmonization and the economic space and all that stuff. How many vehicles can leave here and go to St. Lucia and St. Lucia come to here and so on, usually as Guadeloupe and Martinique is doing? You know? What about the airline service? Why isn't there? I've had two airlines, Dominica Airways and Dominic Airways a few years ago. Contention is, why don't we have those airlines that could move persons as a ferry service between the ports? Yes. On a more regular basis, every hour on the hour or something like that, they used to do it in St. Thomas in the old days. What has happened to the offshore sector? You know, what kind of business are we doing for persons who wish to come in and do offshore activity, especially in education? When Rosie Douglas was in government, he and I spoke about the idea of bringing New Orleans, the University of New Orleans and the University from Montreal to come here and set up offshore education facilities. Guess what? The Americans under Trump do not want anybody from Nigeria, and all of their rich people and the other parts of the world that needed to get an American education. The same way that it can be done in St. Lucia with Monroe College, why can't we bring in universities down here to become Americanized in their educational program, but yet at the same time bringing people to Dominica? And finally, on this would be the question as to how do we treat our Dominicans in the diaspora? They're educated people. These Dominicans are out there at the highest level of business, commerce, technology and everything else. Tourism. I have two of my daughters. One is a director of the Ritz-Carlton. He's a salesman. We have Dominicans in all spheres of life. What are we doing to encourage them to become part of that mastermind for the development process? Are we scared of them? Are they too confident? Are they too energized by the experiences that they've had? Why don't we want them down here? And so whichever government comes in, I dare say that's the direction that they should take. Okay?
All right. Finally, Mr. Seraphine, for you, where do you stand politically as we speak?
Well, first of all, I stand as a Dominican. That's number one. I'm Dominican. And we probably need another 2 hours.
Well, I've been told that I need to bring you back.
Another 2 hours again to continue talking about where I'd like to make my contribution, what contributions I've made, etc., etc. One of these, we'll talk about that. Maybe I'll come back again with you.
Yes, they've told me I need to bring you back.
Yeah, so. I don't mind coming back because there are lots of stuff that I haven't brought to the table. But I'll say this, that my father and myself, my sister, and even some of my children see the Labour Party as where they came from. The reason for that was all shall eat, let the little man get tall and so on and so forth, and all the other things that go with the Labour Party that stood by, because that's where my life was. So I'm what you call a Wassin Labour, I'm not a Porto liver because I'm not Porto. You see, I'm not Porto, I'm Wasian, in that I come from root. But what I'm saying though, it has nothing to, I'm not labor more than anybody else because you don't treated me just as well. I had a sun project with them and a housing project with them. I was made chairman of the National Living Corporation. So I am looking at myself as an elder statesman, above and beyond the fray of the politics of the day. And I have a contribution to make whichever party comes in. And all I can say is people must sit back, carefully analyze who they're dealing with, what they're dealing with, and make their decisions accordingly.
Oliver James Seraphine, it was my absolute pleasure to have you in the spotlight, and I think there's no doubt about it, you're going to be back. I need to have you back. Thank you so much, sir, and you have a pleasant night. Thank you so much for tuning into the program tonight. Next week, Monday, Dr. Hazel Shillingford Ricketts will be in the spotlight. Don't forget to contribute to the GoFundMe for the program. Thank you so much, everyone. There's another program coming up next.